Hello and welcome to the second edition of Downs Your Way, the Rebecca Downs podcast. I'm Colin Speller and today I will be interviewing Steve Birkett.
Good morning Colin, good morning the world out there in podcast land. I'd just like to point out it's Wednesday morning and it's stopped raining.
Well, that's a breakthrough.
It is.
We've had rain of biblical proportions in
cats and dogs living together.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, Steve is the co-songwriter, the lead guitarist, a vocalist, backing vocalist, a duetting vocalist,
Indeed.
A multi-instrumentalist, and the man who basically takes ideas scratched out on an acoustic guitar halfway through a conversation, in my experience anyway, of talking to Rebecca and suddenly she rushes out of the room. I've got an idea.
You get that as well, yeah. I occasionally rush out of the room. Sometimes it's to put an idea out there and sometimes it's to get away from Birmingham City on the telly.
And he takes those ideas and transforms them into something quite amazing, and we will be looking into that process somewhere down the track. But the title of this edition is Back to the Start number 2. And what I want to do, Steve, is take you right back to the beginning. Right back to the beginning period. We'd go back to the beginning of music, but also the beginning of you. So where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? It began for me in Marston Green Hospital. People who know Birmingham would know that was the maternity hospital. We lived on the route to the maternity hospital, and you could see men with bunches of flowers going off on the number. I think it was the number 7 at the time, or it could be the 14. Can't remember. It's a long time ago. But yeah, Marston Green in Birmingham. I actually lived in Sheldon, but that was the nearest hospital. Sheldon, sort of little suburb of Birmingham. I lived sort of on the edges of that. And that's where I lived for 10 years. And went to junior school, all the rest of it. And then at the age of 10, my dad died. And we moved. We moved to Solihull. And changed schools. Didn't move that far into Solihull, but still just on the edge of Birmingham. So my roots are in Birmingham and in the area around it, and that's where I grew up. And that's where I started to learn to play. Although I didn't really learn to play until I got into my early teens, really. And I'd always plonked around on a funny little ukulele thing that I ended up putting garden string onto, just pretending to be whoever happened to be, I don't know, Eddie Cochran or Frank Ifield. I used to try to
say George Formby.
Yeah, could be. I used to try and yodel. If anybody remembers Frank Ifield, really giving my age away here. He was this sort of yodeling Australian singer who was very popular at the time. So yeah, I suppose actually in terms of music, I was singing before I was playing. Let's put it that way. The singing thing came first. School choirs, the usual carry on. I seem to remember taking part in a choir competition at one point. Can't remember what we sang. But yeah, they bust us out to somewhere posh. And we were sort of the scruffy urchins from the suburbs who went somewhere posh and had to sing this song. We didn't know what the hell it was all about, but it was a bit of fun.
Well, that's an interesting connection because had that competition been across a wider geographic spread, you could have looked across the room and seen yours truly in an opposing choir. Yeah. So that takes me back a long way.
You could have been the bunch we had a scrap with in the playground afterwards.
Almost certainly. Okay, so you said you started to play. You started with the ukulele. What happened then? Where did you go from that point?
Well, I mean, just to go back to the starting to play bit, I got my first sort of guitar. It was a little acoustic thing, like most people end up with a battered thing. First thing I did was paint it purple. I'm not quite sure why. Just had some spare purple paint and I thought it'd be a good idea at the time. And I learnt to play with it open-tuned. And then realised that, hang on, this isn't the standard way of playing it. So I then had to sort of learn again. But actually, here's an interesting point, folks. Later on, that open tuning is what I use for a couple of the slide songs that we do. So, Big Sky uses that open tuning. Believe uses that open tuning. So yeah, it all sort of came full circle at that point. But yeah, I learnt on an acoustic guitar, and eventually, probably by the age of 15, I managed to blag a second-hand guitar off somebody. It was a Futurama Deluxe 2.
Good Lord.
Apparently they're sort of fairly sought after in the here's an interesting NAF guitar department, and an old amp. And we started playing sort of, I don't know, freeform jazz, if you like. People like Alice Coltrane and what have you. Because we were in grammar school and we thought it was an intelligent thing to do, you know. And it was fairly easy to play. You know, you just pick out an interesting Dorian mode and noodle around on that. The first gig in that format was at a place in Solihull. It was called the Carpet Club. Anybody who knows Solihull, with Bruton Park, there's a little house which eventually got knocked down. We played there. We played about 3 numbers, and they had to empty the place because it was absolutely rammed and there was a fire risk. And the police turned up. How rock and roll is that? First gig, and the police turned up
and stopped it. That's amazing. That's amazingly rock and roll. So just winding back, were you sort of formally taught or self-taught?
No, self-taught. The only formal teaching I had again was in singing, and we had a rather ambitious choir master at school. Secondary school, and he decided we were going to do Haydn's Messiah, and he brought in an orchestra and soloists and all the rest of it, and that's the first time I had to do anything from written music. And I didn't really know what it was all about, but I could follow the dots up and down. It went as far as that. Oh, that dot's gone up, I've got to sing high. But yeah, I remember the Haydn's Messiah. Something about displaying the firmament came into it somewhere. That's all I can remember.
Well, schoolboy giggles followed, no doubt. But yeah, well, that's another interesting connection because we did exactly the same. We must have had a music master of similar ambition because we were always, always trying to go bigger and better with stuff like that. So first gig. Police turn up and stop it. That obviously didn't discourage you.
No, it didn't. And then I started doing some more sort of poppy, rocky stuff, but only in people's bedrooms and what have you. We didn't actually go out and play much. But all the time you're sort of learning about the guitar and sort of formulating theories about it that later you realise, oh yeah, that's that scale, that's that mode, that's that particular minor sixth, etc. And really, the first proper thing I did was a singer-songwriter with an acoustic guitar, and we've gone right on now to Teachers Training College because went to university, played little bits of guitar, but not much really, just messing around. And then, at Teachers Training College. I started writing and got up and do a few little spots at the folk club, that sort of thing, and went down very well. Pretty soon realised that playing on your own is a pretty scary experience, to be honest, especially when you're doing it for the first time. Everybody's hanging on your every word, hopefully, and you're just hoping I can get Big Yellow Taxi down without busting a string or whatever. So, that was my first thing, singer-songwriter. And to be honest, that's more or less where it stayed, because whatever I've done other than covers bands from then on has been songwriting and arranging.
So, you said it was scary to be on your Todd. So at what point did you gravitate into a band?
Not for a while, actually. It wasn't until I'd actually started teaching, because really my main experience, my main musical experience is in education. That's where I got my widest experience. And it wasn't until a few years after doing a couple of years of teaching, that I'd got some friends of mine that were in a band, and they needed a guitarist and a singer, and I joined up. And at that point, it was how would you describe it? Sort of slightly proggy, if you like, maybe sort of slightly Jethro Tullish, and it eventually became a band called Britain, who got sort of pigeonholed as being heavy, but we weren't really. And we did the classic sort of Birmingham rock scene at the time, places like the Barrel Organ, Mercat Cross, Romeo and Juliet, all of that sort of thing. And one or two of the residencies sort of developed a really good crowd, and we did a little bit of recording, but it never really took off in the way that we wanted to, because it was straddling too many genres, if you like. It wasn't quite rock, it wasn't quite prog, it wasn't modern, it was, what is it? So, yeah, sort of lesson learned a little bit there. And from then on, the rest of the band was just that band, the core of that band, evolving.
Right.
And saying, we'd quite like to do this bit. So at one point we went off into the sort of area explored by Japan, that sort of thing, the sort of slightly oriental type sound, more ambient type sounds. And eventually just became a full-on 80s dancey type band with K2. And that's where I met up with Vince, present bass guitarist, because we dragged him in. We wanted somebody who could play some slappy funk type stuff, because that was the thing to do at the time. So yeah, we advertised for a bass guitarist. In he came, and did the business. He played like stink. Played fantastically well.
And the situation with K2 got quite interesting, didn't it, in terms of reaction and...
Yeah, well, I mean, we did get a record deal, although, again, didn't really go particularly wonderfully. But we had some great times in that band, in that we were sort of travelling around the country. We did some recording in some good studios. We spent a couple of weeks at Utopia, which was Utopia Village in London, working with Dave Harris, D. Harris of Fashion at the time, who big on the Birmingham scene and big in the international scene. They were a cracking band, and he was a really good producer. And he gave us a slightly more electronic type feel, which suited what we were doing. And it was in that period that we got picked up by the Boomtown Rats, if this is what you're referring to. And we were down to do a support tour with them. We did I don't know how you would describe it, as a sort of showcase gig, I suppose, down in London. Tipped up, played our stuff, they liked what they heard, and we were due to tour with them. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which side of the coin you want to look at, this was just after Live Aid, which I suppose meant that the Boomtown Rats weren't exactly at their pomp, if you like. And it meant that Bob went off and decided he was going to go off to Africa and spend all the money that was, make sure that everything was being done proper over there after Live Aid. And we hung around for a bit, waiting for this tour to happen, and it didn't. So, yeah, all of a sudden we were left high and dry. It's a bit of a shame, really, but still.
And what happened after that?
After that, I went back into teaching. And, I was actually science trained. But...
just to say, I mean, with K2, did it just fizzle out then?
It just fizzled out because eventually the work had dried up. The people that were running us, the organisation that was running us, had sort of run its course. And, they decided there's only so much money you can put into it. And I suppose with the Boomtown Rats thing not happening, people got not put off, but you sort of lose the energy for it, and eventually it just died off. Got some stuff around with it, and also it was ironic really that we eventually ditched the more electronic stuff and went into a sort of slightly soul era, if you want to sort of categorise it, sort of slightly simply read-ish, with percussion players and saxophone and what have you. And that actually was the best stuff that I've ever done until we started doing stuff with Rebecca.
Right.
But it was too late, it was like the moment had passed, so what was going to happen after that?
Okay, so that had all fizzled out. You were back in teaching.
Yeah.
Did in what sense did music carry on for you? Was it
right.
a hobby or a...
Well, I went back into teaching at a school in the middle of Birmingham, Small Heath School, fairly close to the Blues Ground for people who know about Birmingham City. And I was just in there doing supply, and I was carrying on writing because we'd still got a publishing deal going, even though we weren't actually playing. So we were sending stuff off to London, and they were having a listen to us, and, hey, yeah, we might be able to use this, might not be able to use it, etc. And while I was doing this supply, there was a competition. I'm trying to remember what magazine it was. I think it might have been Sound on Sound magazine. And it was one of these, send off your tapes and you can win a course on blah, blah, blah. So I thought, right, I will have a bit of this. Put together a tape of a cassette, by the way. CDs hadn't been invented at this point. Or if they had, we weren't posh enough to have any of them. Of various stuff that I'd got recorded. And blow me down with a feather, I won it. So I then spent a week down in, I don't know, sort of Luton Way? I can't remember where it was.
Oh, you'd have remembered if you'd been to Luton, trust me.
Yeah, okay. it was down there anyway, at a Yamaha thing. Oh, I know where it was. No, it was Milton Keynes, because it was where they do the, what's the Open University? The Open University at Milton Keynes, yeah. So I went down there and did a week's residential course with Yamaha. And while I was down there, I met up with a bunch of guys who were in teaching. And the music teachers that were in teaching, and they were busy setting up studios. And they were obviously down there to sort of blag some gear off Yamaha or find out the best way of doing it, that sort of carry on. And having spent a week there, I came back to Small Heath School and said, yeah, it's a fantastic week I've just been on. And these guys are setting up studios. It's sort of given me an idea, ka-ching. And as it happened, they hadn't got a music department at all. National curriculum was just coming in, and you'd got to have a music department. So you put the two things together. All right, I'll run a music department, even though I'm not classically trained. I'll get round that somehow. If we can set up a studio, right? It sounds like Del Boy or something. I'll do your deal. You're all right. You're safe with me. And blow me, they went for it. And the guy who was sort of the outreach bloke, sort of getting in touch with industry, had got a really good contact with Casio. And Casio were big on keyboards at the time. And they said they would sponsor us to set up a studio. The school went grant maintained, so it got control of its own budget. So budget wasn't a major problem. I said, yeah, okay, if I can use the studio to record my own stuff, then fine, I'll put in some of my gear, you put in some of your gear, everybody's happy, away we go. And that's how I ended up teaching music, which was a bloody nightmare, to be honest, because I ended up with 3 years with 9 groups in each year, and I was the only music teacher. Music teachers will experience what this is like. You're the only person, you're a one-man show. Become report time. What's 9 times 9? No, 3 times. 36 groups of 30 kids, and I've got to handwrite all of these reports. I'm thinking, what on earth have I done? But yeah, I'm off on that tack.
I'm sure it doesn't take too long to write "Must Try Hard" 900 times.
It hasn't got a musical bone in his body. Substitute his or her. So that's where I ended up then for a lot of years. What happened with the music department there, though? It was well placed, to be honest, because I was in an area where music wasn't the thing to do. It was a very Muslim-centred area, and it's not that you didn't have musical kids. There were some very, very able musical kids, but not trained at all. Mostly singers, the sort of people that Bex knows when she does vocal tuition and what have you. But it became apparent that we were doing stuff in the school that was sort of fairly out there, if you like, in terms of recording and having what was a fairly prestigious music department. And it got picked up by lots of people in Birmingham, and got picked up by Symphony Hall. I ended up being on the Symphony Hall Advisory Group. Work that out as was it an acronym? Symphony Hall Advisory Group.
Yes.
I swear they set this up just so they could have that title. And we had lots of things coming in, projects coming into the school that I don't think many other schools would have had happening. And I ended up working with all sorts of people. I ended up working with the Welsh National Opera, who came in and did a project, and I'd take kids out to see them rehearse, and we'd go and see them perform. We'd get soloists come in and demonstrate what they could do. And it was the first time that I've actually stood next to a full-on operatic soprano. And my God, it takes your ears out. You know, you talk about rock and roll and winding up your amp to 11. Nothing compared to this. Absolutely fantastic. We had an orchestra come in, which is called the Grand Union Orchestra. Fantastic thing. It pulled in all sorts of people from all over the world. Did projects with schools, and the schools went out and performed with them. So I had a guy come over from Africa, and he sets up with this African harp called a kora, which I can't even describe how this thing looks. It's like a massive, great big gourd which he puts on his lap, and then he's got two sets of strings which he then plays with. Symphony Hall did a load of stuff. CBSO ended up doing quite a lot of work with the CBSO, and it was an amazing experience, but damn hard work, because you're running all the groups yourself, and then you're travelling with them after school, etc. But fantastic, and really fortunate to have great people at Small Heath who were supporting this sort of stuff.
You've told a story about. You said you had lots of people coming in to see the kids, but you told a story once about some guy turning up. You weren't aware of him, but he turned out to be sort of musical royalty of the day. A major security operation ensued.
Oh my life, yes. One of the other upsides of this is that actually I need to move on a little bit more now, because eventually the music department and the drama department, who are a very good friend of mine, who ran the drama department, we joined forces and became Expressive Arts, which then eventually joined forces with art and drama and dance and what have you. We became Creative Arts faculty, if you like. And I ended up in charge of all of that, which meant you've got a great big group of people that hold a lot of power, and we were doing some great work. And it meant that you'd got people who would contact the schools. Can we bring in our artists? We get an agent phone up or a manager phone up. Can we bring our artists down and we'll do a free show for you? Can you guarantee that show will be watched by X number of kids? And we'll just come and play for you. Yeah, great, do it. So we had various bands come in and solo artists and what have you. And I had this one lad who was sort of proposed to me come in. I can't remember his name, unfortunately. As you can tell, my memory's pretty useless. But I did sort of mention the fact that this kid was coming into some of the girls at the school, and I had sort of squeals. I should have realised at the time what I was getting myself into, because he was like the local, or at least the up-and-coming heartthrob rap-type artist. Anyway, word got around that he was coming in on this, I think it was a Thursday afternoon, and there was a whole buzz went around the school, and this kid tipped up with his minders, and the place went into complete meltdown. I had to sort of smuggle him in like the Beatles out of the side of a car. There was a whole social area full of kids where the drama studio was, who weren't going to go to their lesson because they wanted to hear this kid. We filled the room with all of our drama departments and what have you, but there were girls begging to get in to see this lad. And when he finished, he was mobbed, full stop. He was mobbed. So it was the arm round the shoulder, the full-on James Brown thing, the cloak and all the rest. And we smuggled him out through one of the back doors of the school. And I don't know how that went down with the rest of the school, but it certainly caused a buzz in the area. Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. Yeah, I wish I could remember what his name was. I don't think he went on to do anything famous, but happy days, as they say.
If you heard a bit of tip-tapping on the floor, then I should have said at the outset, dog-based interruptions today being provided by Frank Birkett.
He's been very good. He's just had his breakfast, so you might hear him belching at various points as well.
He's just come across to sit and have a bit of fuss while we talk. So, as I said, the idea at the beginning is to bring us up to the point where Rebecca met. So let's just close off that latter period there of your time as a teacher. What happened then?
Right, the thing is, thank you, Frank. Thanks, that's very good. Working in a music department like that, you end up having to play everything, right? So it's like you have to teach yourself how to play keyboards, piano. You have to teach yourself. Obviously, I've got a guitarist and a singer. I ended up learning to play saxophone, flute, drums, lots of Asian instruments because we were in a very Asian area. So sitar, tanpura, dole, tabla, all of those things. And we would get peripatetic teachers coming in and I'd sit in their lessons. Spent some fascinating time over in Handsworth at a little bookshop over there where they sell Asian instruments. Having tabla lessons. Little 6-year-old kids would come in and they'd go ding, 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 and you'd go ding, ding, ding. Like, yeah, okay, maybe it's not in my genes, but I don't know what it is. They were just fantastic. But yeah, amazing times, and that sort of developed a whole skill set, if you like. That doesn't sound too pretentious, on various instruments. And also with the recording side of it, the recording studio, obviously. I was recording people coming in as well as the kids that were in the school, and developing, again, a skill set in recording. Although at the time it was reel-to-reel tape and great big desks and what have you, it wasn't until the latter period that we started moving onto computers, and Ataris were the first one. People remember Ataris? They were the first computer-based things that I recorded on, and eventually onto a Mac. So I'd reached a point where I'd sort of got this skill set, and I was sort of thinking, well, okay, I'm doing a lot of work for school. I could do with doing something for myself. And it was like, okay, let's go out and see what's around. Nothing too taxing. So covers bands came into it. So I ended up joining a couple of covers bands, and still play with Bill, a classical guitarist, with a duo called Acoustica. It's a really nice combination. Bill had turned up at school to do some classical guitar lessons, and I'd sat in on a couple of those, and we ended up playing, and there's a good little bit of magic there. So that got me out playing again. even though I probably hadn't got time to do it. I was probably just burning the candle at both ends. But it meant that I'd got something there that was, if you like, for me, as well as all the stuff that I was putting into the kids. But yeah, eventually, I suppose I'd sort of reached a point where it almost burnt out. There was almost too much going on. So I decided I'd get to a certain point and I'd just take early retirement and see what happened after that. And I'd got enough work going on in terms of covers bands to cover the difference in salary. And I thought, well, let's make a new start at that sort of age. And that's roughly where we were when we met up with Bex.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Fascinating stuff. Really, really interesting. And I hope everyone who's listening in's enjoyed it as much as I have. And it does bring us very nicely to the point where you two met and got together. And we'll look at that almost certainly in the next episode, which will be due out in 2 weeks' time. Once again, thank you very much for tuning in. As ever, if you've comments, feedback, questions, please do get in touch via any of the normal means through Facebook, Twitter message, email, or what? Carrier pigeon.
Semaphore.
Semaphore. Yeah, well, semaphore might be a bit difficult, but please, love to hear from you. So thanks very much, Steve, for your time. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Very much look forward to the next episode, which will be out in a couple of weeks' time, when, oh my goodness me, I'll have Steve and Rebecca to keep under control, and one, possibly even two, canine observers in the background. Anyway, until then, thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheers all.
Thank you for listening to Downs Your Way. For further information on the music and to purchase albums and other merchandise, please visit www.rebeccadowns.com. This episode's merchandise discount code is Birkett, all in capitals BIRKETT. This will give you a 5% discount applied at checkout and will be valid for 2 weeks from Monday the 7th of October 2019.